in Esther, week 3, and we saw last week how God had positioned Esther as queen and put Mordecai in a place of influence at the king's gate, and because of that he was able to find out about this plot against the king, and because he had the inside connection with Esther, he was able to get that related to the king and save the king's life, essentially. And we're reminded then how God works through ordinary people and even difficult circumstances to accomplish his purposes. And tonight, week 3, is an evil man with an evil plan. And we see the tone shifts drastically. We're introduced to one of the most wicked characters in the Bible, I guess. It'd be pretty bad. But anyhow, his name is Haman. We will see how his pride, insecurity, and deep-seated hatred set in motion a plan to destroy the entire Jewish people. But even in this dark chapter, we will see the glimpses of God's sovereign control. So, leave my bag out in the car, and my Bible's all warm. In Esther chapter 3, we meet Haman the Agagite. His promotion by King Ahasuerus sets the stage for one of the greatest threats the Jewish people faced in the Old Testament. The chapter is important because it ties into the larger story of the Bible. As we've said, the book of Esther doesn't have God's name in it, but you can see all these different things that are connected throughout the Bible, especially in the Old Testament times, and even some stuff that goes forward into the New Testament. But this chapter, again, is important. Haman is not just a random villain. He is connected to Israel's ancient enemy, the Amalekites. And his connection helps us see the events in Esther how it fits into God's bigger plan. And even though Haman's plan looks unstoppable, God is still in control. And we see evidence of his hidden hand even in the timing of events. So tonight we'll see an evil man with an evil plan cannot thwart the sovereign purposes of God. So let's read the first 6 verses of Esther chapter 3. Or if you want, I can. It might have some goofy names.
I can start.
Okay.
Sometime later, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by. So the king commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. Then the palace officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" They spoke to him day after day, but still he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this to see if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told him he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down and show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all of the kings throughout the empire of Ahasuerus.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Colby. Yeah, and we see here that King Ahasuerus has promoted Haman above all the other officials in the kingdom. The one book makes a point about maybe it was this whole plot to kill him by these 2 eunuchs that had the king, looking to make Haman over everything. But, it didn't really say. And it could just be that he was a mover and a shaker and was a guy who was on the come, as they say. And King Ahasuerus thought he could put him to good use. So we see in verse 1 it identifies him in a very specific way. It says, Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite. And something I should have pointed out a little bit more last week when it introduces Mordecai. It says he is son of Jair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Benjamite. And that's very important. It is drawing a connection, even if one isn't there, to King Saul, who was a son of Kish and also a Benjamite. So it's setting up these 2 different things here. And so...
Like the tribe of Benjamin, you mean?
Yeah. Yep. Saul was son of Kish, and this, of course, wouldn't be the same Kish, but he could be from the same line. I was trying to look at that because I actually went through just today, 2 Chronicles 5 or 6 or something like that. And anyhow, it had like Saul's line, and it kept going on and on and on, you know. But it never got to anything that overlapped with another Kish in there. But it's basically setting up to say, it's wanting you to think about the fact that Mordecai the Benjamite is similar to King Saul, son of Kish the Benjamite, you know, who was king, because that's where this whole thing with Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, comes into play. The description here isn't incidental. The author is intentionally connecting Haman to Israel's ancient enemies, the Amalekites. So to understand this, we need to go all the way back to Genesis and kind of weed our way through Scripture. But in lieu of time, I will save you guys all the flipping around.
Saul wasn't a Jew?
He was. The Jews are like the tribe of Israel, you know. And anyhow.
Why would a king want to kill his own people?
What?
Well, you said something about the kings. Okay, never mind. I'm getting them mixed up.
Yeah. Two different kings in play.
Two different kings.
There's King Saul, and there's also King Agag, or whatever is how you say his name.
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, those two kings. And actually, those two kings didn't want to kill each other. Well, I think Agag probably would have wanted to kill Saul, but Saul didn't want to kill him, and that's where the trouble started. Really started with his bowing to the people, but that was part of the problem. Genesis 36:12 tells us that Amalek was a descendant of Esau through his son Eliphaz. So this places the Amalekites in the border of the broader family line of the Edomites. We talked about the Edomites a bit before, but they were Esau's people, and they had his whole spot. God gave him this land, and God blessed Esau and his people. And even God had told, we'll get to this here, I guess, in Exodus and that, but God had told Moses, let the people know, you're not going to take any of Esau's land, any of the Edomite land. That's their inheritance. This up here is going to be your inheritance. So there was like blessings for them, but they didn't apparently, at least down later generations, did not follow the God of Isaac and Abraham, but instead they went astray. And part of that in Exodus 17:14 through 16, and mentioned all through Exodus, Numbers, and maybe even Leviticus, I'm not sure, but definitely Deuteronomy, you see mentions about the Amalekites. And it recorded that the Amalekites attacked Israel shortly after the Exodus when they were weak and vulnerable. And in fact, they said they attacked the people in the back, the stragglers or whatever. And because of that, God declared ongoing judgment against Amalek and commanded Israel to remember what he had done. Then in 1 Samuel 15, King Saul was commanded to completely destroy the Amalekites. He defeated them, but failed to fully obey. He spared King Agag and the best of the livestock. He said the people wanted to keep the livestock and then sacrifice it, so he did. And so Samuel shows up, and he's like, what's this? I hear sheep and stuff bleeding. You're supposed to have killed all these guys. And then Saul was trying to hem and haw and say, well, the people wanted me. We were going to sacrifice them to God. And Samuel said, God wants obedience more than sacrifice. And then Samuel asked for a sword, and he personally killed Agag. But even centuries later, and you see like the Amalekites causing problems like in David's time and stuff like that and all through. But in 1 Chronicles 4:42 through 43, it records that a remnant of the Amalekites still existed, and that particular group down in on Mount Seir, down in the Edom area, they were defeated by 500 men of the tribe of Simeon rather. So even all those years later, they were still some of those Amalekites. And now we see that that Haman here is an Amalekite. He is a descendant somehow from King Agag. That's why they call him the Agagite. And so it links him to this long history of hostility between God's people. And, of course, disdain from God's people towards them. They were devoted to destruction, basically. And that is probably why we see that Haman here refuses to bow or pay any kind of homage to Haman, because he knows he's an Agagite. He knows he's an Amalekite, so he's not going to bow down to him. And that's kind of what it says there in verse 3 and 4, or 4, about the king's servants there. They talked to him, and he spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them. They told Haman, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, like he's going to let him get away with it. For he told them, Mordecai told them that he was a Jew. That's why he wasn't going to bow down to an Amalekite, Haman. It wasn't because he didn't like Haman. He probably didn't even know him, other than the fact that he was known as Haman the Agagite, the same way that Mordecai was known as Mordecai the Jew.
Bow down to kings.
Well, the king says you got to bow down.
Okay.
It was the king's order. Like,
Okay.
basically, it was because he'd made him like basically second in command over all the other people under the king. I guess that was one of his things. He told everybody to bow down to him. So it wasn't bow down in worship like he was a god. It wasn't like in Daniel, where they wouldn't bow down to the big idol that the king Nebuchadnezzar made. It was
out of respect.
What's that?
Out of respect.
Yeah, this is like a bow of respect. Yeah, and he wouldn't do it because he was a Jew, and it also explains why that Haman wasn't content with just, okay, this one guy won't bow down to me. I'll have him strung up or flogged or whatever the king would say, or whatever he could swing. He wanted to kill all the Jews. That same ancient rivalry from back in the day is still there. The same hatred, even though they were far away from the land, either of their lands, that enmity was there. So, as a Benjamite, Mordecai wouldn't bow, and as an Amalekite, Haman wasn't content with just killing or reprimanding Mordecai. So, Haman's wounded pride becomes the spark for something much larger. And again, it seems like he didn't even know it. It was like day after day. And it kind of makes sense if you look at the way Haman is described. He probably wasn't looking down at the little people. He's probably just busy with his head in the air, thinking how great he was, and not noticing this one guy here not bowing. But the other people noticed he wasn't bowing, and they brought it to his attention. But anyhow, so he determined to destroy all the Jewish people throughout the empire, which, of course, the Medo-Persian Empire at that time was like the entire known world. So it would have been all the Jews everywhere, pretty much. Even the Jews that were back in Jerusalem would still be part of that empire. So, why do you think Mordecai was willing to risk so much by refusing to bow to Haman?
Say because he's following what God told him to do, or not, or was it God, or was it just
I think it was probably the fact that,
Saul?
well, it wasn't Saul, but I think he would probably know, as a Benjamite, probably more maybe than the average person, but all of them would know that God had said that they were going to be destroyed, the Amalekites. He said, once you guys get peace in the land, then you're going to take care of the Amalekites. And Saul failed to do that. And so they continued on, and then they now are like that. Basically, Saul's disobedience is coming back to him even all this time later. But that was the reason that basically that was like the final straw for God taking the kingdom away from him and giving it to David. But yeah, that's probably the reason. It seems like the reason. It seems like such an odd thing. It's like so much stuff we see in this book, there's like no real explanation for it. We're not told why Vashti wouldn't go. We're not really told why King Ahasuerus commanded her to come to his feast. We don't know why that he made Haman, the number 2 guy in all the land. We don't know why Mordecai didn't bow. But, we can kind of piece things together by what either history tells us about how, like, the feast worked, or how the history between it's kind of like implying the history here by the names they use when it talks about the people here. But anyhow, in our fill in the blanks.
So would that have wiped out all of Esau's descendants, or just that one?
Just that one.
That one side of
Yeah.
his son.
Yeah, it was basically his grandson, like his line from there. Yeah, was the kind of what the thing was. And of course, later on, then there was a bigger overarching thing about the Edomites, and I don't remember which book it is, Obadiah maybe, saying basically that they're going to be all in trouble because of what they did whenever the Babylonians captured Israel or captured Jerusalem. They were there, they were looting, they were arresting people, basically making sure they didn't escape.
So then they got wiped out after that, right?
Yeah, at some point, yeah. They did.
So
Maybe. There might still be some left. There might still be that remnant, because there's...
It's hard to completely wipe out a complete remnant.
I mean,
complete...
Like, even when you get in the New Testament, Herod the Great was an Edomite. He was an Idumean, but in a medium or something like that. Imodium AD, I think. But anyhow, he was the people that were basically the Edomites at that time. They were called Idumeans or something.
So who are the descendants of, like, the Iranians, the Iraqis, the Syrians?
They say a lot of times that was what's his name, Ishmael.
Ishmael.
That there are Ishmaels like Cline, the Arabs, I think. I could be wrong about that, but yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking.
But he was
Probably it was.
fruitful and multiplied, got out, and even Esau married one of Ishmael's daughters or something, I think, or granddaughter, something like that. So they're kind of intertwined in the Edomites as well, at least some part of it. Esau had at least 2 wives, and then he saw that when they sent Jacob away, he realized, oh, Mom's not happy with my Canaanite wives. I'll get a wife from our relatives also. But he went to Esau as opposed to back to the other ones. And he might have had other concubines and stuff too. It's hard to say. Let me just say, First Chronicles is a very interesting book. It has a lot of boring genealogies, and it has a lot of boring land stuff. So you got stuff from like Numbers, and also from Joshua, where it's talking about they got this piece of land and that piece of land and this piece of land and this town and that town. And it's like, ugh.
Rules. Leviticus. Look, can't do this, can't do that.
Leviticus is pretty cool. But anyhow, but First Chronicles actually does put like little bits of story in there too, that you find out things. It's kind of neat. But anyhow, neither here nor there, I suppose. But yeah, on our fill in the blanks here. Number 1, Haman's promotion by King Ahasuerus sets the stage for one of the greatest. What did the Jewish people face in the Old Testament? One of the threats. That's right. And number 2, the description of Haman as the Agagite intentionally connects him to Israel's ancient enemies known as the what? Amalekites. Very good. According to Genesis 36, Amalek was a descendant of who through his son Eliphaz?
Esau.
That's right, descendant of Esau. In 1 Samuel 15, King Saul defeats the Amalekites, but failed to fully obey God by sparing their king named what? Agag. That's right. Even centuries later, 1 Chronicles 4 records that a what of the Amalekites still existed and was later defeated by men from the tribe of Simeon?
Remnant.
A remnant. That's right. When questioned by the king's servants, Mordecai explained that he refused to bow to Haman because he was a what?
Jew.
He was a Jew. And number 7, after learning of Mordecai's refusal, Haman chose to destroy how many of the Jewish people throughout the empire rather than targeting only Mordecai? All of them. That's right. Assuming nobody's seen The Professional, but there's a great all of them scene there with Gary Oldman. That's very good. Anywho, that was kind of Haman. All of them. So, let's look at section 2 here. Haman cast the lot and makes his plan. Someone would like to read verses 7 through 9 in chapter 3.
I can do it. I tried that. 7 through 9. Okay, where's 9? There it is. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast that is, the lot, before Haman to determine the day and month until it fell on the 12th. Until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries.
All right, thank you very much. One thing I should point out, which I didn't put in the notes here, but you see at the end of chapter 2, or towards the end, when Esther was made queen, it was the 7th year of Ahasuerus' reign. But here we see in verse 7 that it is now the 12th year of his reign. So she'd been a king for, 5 years? Or, well, it's the first month, so
She's been a queen that long?
4.5. Yeah, she'd been a queen for that long. So, like this plot that Mordecai discovered, it probably wasn't Esther was made queen today. He found out about it yesterday or the day after that, and then Haman is promoted the next day. You know, there's a good amount of time in between all of these things happening, which is another reason to doubt that one thing there. Anywho, it's important to read stuff carefully. I missed over that until reading it yesterday. But, yeah, so this is like, all this has taken place over this long period of time. But now we're going to see, though, that the time frame gets basically like put in motion, because he casts the lot and they don't know exactly what it is, but it sounds like they cast it until it came up on a certain thing. So I was going to bring in a 12-sided die and say if you rolled it, and then whatever month you get, that would be like the month. But it's probably like they had maybe matching dice or something that you would roll, and when they both came up the same message, they both came positive maybe, then that was the month. So they rolled it, it says they rolled it for each day, and they rolled it for each month to basically try to come up with the optimal time for his plan to succeed. But there's his problem, right? He's counting on some sort of a thing, but as we know in Proverbs 16:33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So even though he's trying to come up with what he thinks is going to be the best way, God is just able to use that to give these guys plenty of time. It's the first month, and I guess, I don't know if tradition says or what, but they thought, well, okay, there it is, the 13th day, that's coming up here. But the first month, of course, was when they came out of Egypt, and so that's when Passover was, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and first fruits, and that was all like in that first month, starting at like the 15th or the 14th or something like that, depending upon when the moon was full. But, so that's when this kicks off, this whole thing. But because of the way that the lots fell, it ends up being the 12th month. So he's going to have 11 months between the time when he gets his plan approved until it's actually going to happen. And so, yeah, he was trying to get the most favorable time, but God used that to his own will. Haman presents the Jews as a scattered people with different laws who do not keep the king's laws. He offers a massive tribute, or massive bribe, of 10,000 talents of silver to fund their destruction. talent was about 75 pounds. So
what did he
75,000.
do?
Well, part of it, as we'll see here, is that they had to get people to go around and copy this in everybody's language, take it to all the different places. Because remember, he had this vast kingdom. What did it say? It was like from India to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. Well, now they got to take this message to all these provinces to say, hey, everybody get your whooping sticks out. On this date, we're going to kill the Jews and take all their stuff. And so he had to get all of that and all the infrastructure stuff, I guess, all that stuff that was going to happen. He said he basically would pay the king to make this happen. That's how desirous he was of killing all the Jews.
So he must have been wealthy too then.
Yeah, I guess. Unless he was just going to write a check and hope it didn't bounce when it comes around. But yeah, that was his offer, was this massive bribe. And it's funny, Brownback here has Haman's accusation is a half-truth. The Jews did not have their own laws. They were not disloyal to the king. Haman's real motive was personal hatred rooted in ancient enmity. But at the same time, if you look back in Ezra, I believe, when they started to work on the temple, or they started to rebuild the temple, then the enemies sent a letter to Cyrus and said, hey, you guys can't let these Jews make their own place. Look in your records, they've always been rebels and problem people. So don't let them do that. And they looked in the records and it's like, oh yeah, these guys are a bit of a problem. They had rebelled against Babylon a couple different times. And they had fought against all these places because at one time they were a world power. And so if they looked in the records, they would have seen, well, yeah, there's maybe some truth to that previously they had been rebellious. But they weren't, keeping different laws. And like Mordecai obviously was someone who was considered, high enough in society to sit at the king's gate, which was an honor to, arbitrate things, be a witness for deals and stuff like that went on. So, number 8 in our fill in the blank. Haman cast the what, also called the lot, to determine the most valuable or the favorable day to carry out his plan against the Jews? Per. Anybody know what plural of per is?
Purrs.
Purge?
Nope, it
Isn't there a
is.
movie called Purge?
There is one called the Purge, yeah. Which is almost like what this would have been. It was
Well, I was
like,
wondering-
we're going to purge the land of all the Jews. But, yeah. But anyhow, the plural is Purim, which is the festival that this book kind of shows how it came to be. And that's why they got the name Purim from that. And that's why it's held on this, whatever day that is, of December. And I think in the New Testament, it's called like a winter festival. Jesus is in Jerusalem for the winter festival or something like that. And that's what it's talking about. Anywho. So the month of Adar. So number 9. The timing chosen by Lot gave the Jewish people nearly how many months before the attack was scheduled to take place? 11. That's right. Then the king's agreement and the published decree. That's Esther 3, 10 through 15. Do you want to read? You want me to?
I can. What was it?
Okay. 10 through 15.
15.
Yep.
So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of
Hammedatha, maybe?
The Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Then, on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out the script of each province, and in the language of each people, all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. 14? Sorry.
Two more, 14 and 15.
Oh, 14 and 15. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered.
Yep, there you go. Thank you. And again, this is another one of those feasts that they have. They call it a feast. They basically just sit down and had a drink, I guess. But when this whole thing went about, and you see that the king gives Haman his signet ring, effectively giving him authority to carry out the plan. A decree is written and sent throughout the entire empire. On the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, are to be destroyed and their possessions plundered. And this decree is published well in advance. And this gave time for the news to spread and for God to work behind the scenes. And we see the city of Shushan, or the city of Susa, was perplexed in confusion. Even the pagan citizens recognized that this decree was unjust. I don't know, maybe not. But it'd be, like if you were told that your neighbor that you knew, it's like, okay, on this day you're supposed to go over and kill him.
We'll get out of town.
It'd be kind of crazy.
Where are you going to go, though?
Yeah.
He run everything.
Yeah, this was like the entire known world. They'd have to go to China somehow to get away from the edict. And that's the thing, and it threw the whole city into confusion. They didn't know what was going on. This is crazy. And this is the second such order that was given in the book. The first one was about the fact that Queen Vashti was going to be deposed, and that all the women are supposed to obey their men. And that was like the first thing they get. Now they get this second piece of mail, and it's like, well, this is another thing. They're supposed to cook something too or something. It's like, no, you're supposed to go kill everybody on this certain date. So two very different commands going out. But you can see why, I guess, maybe there have been money involved. But interestingly enough, the king doesn't want any money to come in. He just says, don't worry about it,
And it's not the army, it's just individual people?
Yeah, everybody's supposed to go and do that. Yeah, everybody get your...
Yikes.
Yeah, and get your sword out and go kill your neighbor.
And take its stuff.
And take his stuff. Yeah, that's probably the real, motivation behind it. It's like anybody's jealous. It's like, okay, I can go get his good stuff.
Free thing to kill and steal.
Yeah. Yeah, if
Free
you want to, go kill and steal. And so everybody was confused. Like, what is this about? And it's, again, it kind of gives, it shows the lie that Haman put forward about the fact that they obeyed their own laws and everything. If the Jews were completely separate and everybody was like, oh yeah, I've got these guys here. They don't follow our rules. They don't do anything that we do. Then it might be, yeah, we're going to get rid of them because they're not good for the national security and that. But as it was, they were their neighbors. They were the people that they knew. And that was kind of what you see happening in when the Assyrians took the northern kingdom of Israel. They took them and put them in foreign lands so that they would have to kind of assimilate into those areas. And the same thing the Babylonians did. They took all the people that they thought were worthwhile. They took them to Babylon, and they took them to be, Daniel and his friends were brought up to be advisors to the king and that. And so, these would have been people that would have been, to all intents and purposes, loyal citizens of King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes, but now all of a sudden they all have a death sentence on them. So it's pretty crazy. And
I think you'd miss the tax money.
What's that?
You think he would miss the tax money?
Yeah, well, he was a pretty generous guy. I think he had plenty. Unlike our current government, I think they spent within their means back then. You couldn't tell people like, yeah, we promise we'll pay you some money. Well, let me make it up for you real quick. They actually had to have gold and silver and stuff. So, and he was over everything, so he had plenty. So even though there was this massive 75,000 pounds of silver that he promised to pay, the king's like, don't worry about it. It's kind of a, we call that like a hard cost, or a soft cost rather. The king's paying all these people anyways. So if they're sitting around the palace, or if they're running around, publishing these rules, either way, they're getting paid. So it's no big deal to the king, I guess, for that. But they sit down to have a drink, celebrate what they think is a done deal. But God is not surprised or threatened by their plans. And Haman represents the height of human pride, insecurity, and hatred. He is willing to commit genocide because one man refused to bow to him, although probably also it just brought to the fact that that one man was this group that his people have had a hatred for, basically forever. And of course this stands out in stark contrast to King Jesus, who did not demand honor but humbled himself, as we saw in Philippians when we went through that book. He was willing to die for enemies rather than destroy them. He ultimately defeats the power of evil, not through political power, but through the cross. Haman's plan to destroy God's people ultimately fails. In the same way, all the schemes of the enemy against God's people will ultimately fail because of Jesus. So number 10, in contrast to Haman, Jesus humbled himself and was willing to what for his enemies rather than seek their destruction? Die, that's right. And remember, Jesus, it says in John 3:17 that basically everybody was condemned already. Jesus didn't have to do anything. They're already condemned, but Jesus came to prevent that, if we would but allow him to. Repent and believe. So, we see here pride is dangerous. Haman's wounded pride led to a plan of mass murder. Unchecked pride can destroy us and harm others. And of course, we know, if we've read the book already, how that gets turned around. And we also know that God is still in control. Even when evil seems to be winning and a decree has been signed, God is working, seeing the long delay and the perplexity of the people.
I wonder if Hitler was a descendant of him.
I don't know.
Sounds similar.
Yeah, well, there's a whole thing throughout history you can see of God's people being targeted for extermination, like with the Pharaoh and do that. These, like the Amalekites, others. There's always that going on, and yet God always preserves at least a remnant. Stand for what's right. Mordecai's refusal to bow, though costly, was an act of integrity. All the Jews in the whole world were probably thinking, couldn't you just bow? But no, he didn't. God's people are never without hope. Even in the face of an empire-wide death sentence, God was not finished. And that's an interesting thing. And we'll see next week how God has positioned Mordecai and Esther comes into play to save God's people. So anyhow, any questions? Keen observations? Smart remarks? Anything?
Pretty doom and gloom for the Jewish people
It does seem
now.
pretty bad, doesn't it? And everybody's confused what's going on. And of course, amongst that, there's probably also those that were like thinking, "Ooh, this is going to be lucrative." Those guys got a lot of loot. And anyhow, look at your own life. Think about how you see evil and injustices that seem overwhelming, and know that we can call out to God and trust His hidden hand, even in things that doesn't seem like it's going right. That it's not over, and God's still in control and able to work things together for His good.